So, if you have been following, you can see that something has changed on the screen. There are two hit bars at the bottom of the screen, and the score has now become a timer and a round counter. Okay, so, and I've also done quite a bit of work. The code has changed slightly. I've done a couple more refinements, and there are some moves. So characters can punch and kick and do damage. So this is me playing with both hands. So you can see Ryu has his kick. There's his punch. I'll call them Dancer and Dragon now. They have some of their attacks. So the process by which attacks are going to be done has been set up, and of course we have a timer going on. So now Ryu, the Ryu character, Dragon, actually Dragon, Angel, Master, Soldier, Oni, they all have their attacks. Fairy, Dancer, Rocker, Butterfly, Wolf, they all have their punches and kicks now. And the speed of the characters have been adjusted so that each has, some have advantages, but yeah, the hit bars now work. So we have, let's see, I'll pick these two. Okay. Kind of a little hard to play here because I'm just one person, but let's see. Now this was done, as I said before, using missile sprites. I'm gonna have a kick fight here. Now I don't have the knockdown animation plugged in yet. I also don't have the end of the timer. Stuff like that. So yeah, just the process of damage being taken by the character is finished, and a couple of attacks are put in there. So there we go. So as far as refining the code goes, there have been some refinements. I also removed some small changes, and I might try to put them back in later. But I had to remove some of the missile sprite enhancements for the Dancer character that differentiated her from the, or not from the Dancer, but from the there, that seems like it's jittering now. I don't know if that's the timer. Let me see if it's doing that with other ones. Yes, it is. That just started. That might actually be that the timer is set up, but I don't know. So that's going to have to be dealt with. That didn't happen before. Last thing I did though was set up the timer based on the score. So let's see. So as you can see, the punching is happening here. It's actually a combination of the animation for the character, a frame of animation, and then coordinated missile sprite placement. So the missiles are being put up on the screen right at that exact moment when the animation is happening. And you can see how his has, when he kicks, has a red shoe with kind of a little white edge to it, almost like the sole of the shoe. This is done by changing the missile height in the second frame. So in the first frame the missile height might be 2, and then in the next frame it will be 1 or 0, which is 1 pixel wide. So when you're doing the missile heights, you'll get 0 is actually 1 pixel width, 1 is 2 pixels width, 2 is 3 pixels. So it's, you know, you have to think that when you're dealing with code, is you get to remember that 0 is a number and 0 has its own little place. So if there are 256 possibilities with 8 bits in the different configurations of 8 bits being off or on, being 1s or 0s, then you're starting with 0, and so your cap is 255, which is 256 possible configurations. So with that in mind, 0 is 1 pixel, 1 is 2 pixels, 2 is 3 pixels, and so on. So he's got that. She's doing the same punch as Dragon and Oni and Master, but because her character's speed is slightly different, then her moves are going to be a little quicker. So now to get her foot to be purple, I had to activate her missile sprite in the dragon character frame, which is part of her frame. See, now you can see that the timer is starting to work, to restart, because to get the timer to work, it's actually going down in 100. So this would be a score, and the score, you know, would be a 100,000 placeholder maximum. So your maximum score would be 999,999. Then it would flip. And I think people have done that with asteroids and certain games like that. So to use it as a timer, I have the variables SC through SC2, SC being score, the score counter, and it can be used to read each segment of the score. It can also be used to put data in to each segment. So later I'll say if SC2, which is the middle two numbers, equals a certain number, or it might be SC1, then the timer will be over. You know, I'll do whatever sequence to end the round, and then we'll take a look at the whatever placeholders are for the hit bars to determine the winner if the timer runs out. Now the left and right score will be hopefully be round counters. So, and I'm thinking one way to make the game more interesting might be to be able to set up round counters to where, rather than just a, you know, best 2 out of 3 rounds like what most of these end up as by default, have something best 5 or so on, have more rounds be able to be selected to make the game a little more interesting. Now the moves have only been put into the versus mode, but the ability to start the single player modes is there. So he can still do a punch because the punch code has been moved over, but the other code for kicks and things like that have not been moved over. So, but if I go ahead and choose one of the S&K style characters in the one player mode, then that will also work. So here you can see an S&K character being controlled with the one player, with the left side first player joystick. Now that the characters are plugged in now, the controls for them, later on a random event calculator will be used, a randomizer, a random number generator will be used to control the opponent. And the difficulty switch might be tied to that random generator. And I talked about that earlier. So the game has moves. We have fighting moves, hit bars, and a timer. And it is really pushing it. It's pushing the game. It's pushing it to where it wants to not be able to handle it from how many cycles are going on, even without having go subs and things like that. So many calculations are going on with so many variables working all at the same time that it's pushing the system. Also, I have to go through and find places where code might be getting caught up, getting snagged up on itself. For instance, calculating the missile locations was causing jitters and causing problems, and so there are places in the game where I need to reset the missile XY location before it's placed where it needs to be. Otherwise it will get tripped up on its own calculations. So one refinement that's happened to the code to speed things up is because the characters' variables are all going to be the same no matter what. Each of the loops to control the controllers themselves, the variables for each of the controllers, they don't need to have the character placement information in every single loop. And this is a kind of a tip for when you're programming, is if you have if you're using the same data over and over again somehow, somewhere, then, and it never changes, suppose, like for instance with these moves, I had a control, an area where the controls variables were taken up and as part of the loop, and that's what you're seeing at the end up here at the top. It says right player jump counter. Let's see, about right here we're seeing the right player jump counter. Up above it are some joystick counters. Now when that's part of the loop and it's going through to get the variables to move the different objects on the screen, I did have the move speeds and all the updates to the variables included at the end of each of those parts. But because that group of data never changes, and because I needed room, I'm really pushing the system, I took that and moved it into another bank by itself. And so we have a new label called move count, and that's down here. So here's move count, and these are the movement counters for each of the characters. Now because of that, the collisions can be calculated based on each move, and that makes it so that I can change the effects of an attack. So when a character is hit by a kick, it might cause them to fall down, or if they are hit, it might cause more damage, things like that. Now before, because this all of this data here for the movements, what I'm calling movement counters, it's maybe a better term would be movement timers, were part of every one of these groups of instructions. They were each taking up a lot of code. So the tip there would be that if you have repeating data, any repeating data, and suppose you're rewriting it over and over again, separate it, put it in its own area, give it its own label, and then go to that label, rather than having the data that would be used over and over again taking up space. So in this case, like I said, the movement data was at the end of each part of the controller label. So when it's going to that label to get the instructions for the controller, it's reaching the bottom and it's saying, oh, here's the movement data, and I'm going to calculate where the character is going to be now. So I'm looking through and I'm like, oh, well, I'm running out of space in these controller areas because I need to be able to calculate collisions for the damage, and because when you're hit, it doesn't just cause damage, it knocks the character back. It eliminates the variable, it resets the variable for the attack. So there's somewhat of a loop being done here. So if you're holding down punch, your character will punch. And then after the loop is complete, they'll punch again. It's not immediate though. So, you know, a rapid fire punch, you would have to punch the button over and over again continuously. But just holding the controller will also create a loop. And I like that. I want to keep that in there because it makes it easier. People can concentrate a little bit less on having to button pound and a little bit more on their character's placement. But so yeah, because that data was being repeated and taking up space, and I needed to free up space, I moved it into its own label, separated it, and then each of the groups of data that it's going through in the loop to collect the updated variables for the character's movement from the joysticks will then go to that next label, which counts how many moves they're going to make and continues on. And that same thing will be accessed by the 3 different modes, the versus mode, the one-player left side mode, or the one-player right side character mode, which everybody's going to be on the left side anyway. So, but the moves themselves, as I go in versus here, hopefully this isn't getting blurry or anything, we can see that there are fire button counters. Those have always been there. Then under it, now we have new data. We have the left side punch counter and left side kick counter. We can see that joystick 0 fires variable is M. It has the same counter as the right, left, up, down. I went ahead and just put 8 as the cap. And so when you press fire, it begins to count. Then in the middle of that counter, which would be 4, it's saying, okay, you've pushed the button enough, let's go ahead and reach out and make this thing happen. So it's saying on the left side punch counter, we can see about right here in code, this line right here, okay, if M equals 4, that's saying if the button's been pressed for a moment, okay, and your reflection is the normal starting of the game reflection, meaning your left character is non-reflected at the left side of the screen. Then we have and variable 0, 0, variable 1 is 0. That means your character is not currently moving. You're not moving right or left on the screen. Variable 3 is 0 and variable 2 is 0. Those are going to be your jumping and squatting variables. So you're not jumping, you're not squatting, you're not moving right, you're not moving left. Okay, and you're not flipping. You're not currently flipping or going through the jump move. Then, with all those conditions met, now your counter is increasing for movement, and then you're activating the punch variable, so for variable 19 is actually my attack variable for the left side player. 20 is the variable for the right side player. So to make these moves work, I've assigned them just a number for each attack. So once punch is activated, we can see variable 19 equals 1. And then right underneath it, I have a group of data that is controlling what that means. So we say if variable 19 equals 1, now and E, which is the counter, is less than 8, then E equals 1. So E is going to be a kind of a timer for the punch. You get a little group of time. The next part, variable 19 equals 1 and H equals 0, that's your reflection. And M equals 5. That's the next number on your button press, because it goes all the way up to 7, goes from 0 to 7. Okay, then variable 4, that's your x-axis, is taken back by 2 spaces. Okay, but if you're facing the other way, then it's added by 2 spaces. Now what that's doing is, and you can see up in the first 2 parts of that statement, it's making your character move forward slightly. Your character, when they punch, moves forward 2 pixels, just slightly. But I don't want them to, like, you know, shimmy across the screen just for punching. Punching is a stationary event. Your character punches, but they're still standing in the same place. That's not how kick is. I'm making it so when you do your kick, you're actually moving forward while kicking. You could, in effect, move across the screen back and forth by kicking. But with punching, it's a stationary event. So your character is moving forward to punch 2 pixels, but then they're moving back 2 pixels to end up in the exact spot that they were in when they began the punch. Okay? And so that's happening all in that 5 lines of code for the punch. So we're seeing it's happening right here. This is 5 lines. Now under it we have the kick counter, and it's doing a similar thing. It does the same thing, but because you're actually pressing right and the button, it's also moving the character. Now I can eliminate that. I can just make it so the kick is stationary. I'm considering doing that, but then again, I don't know if I want to do that, because it might help with the functioning of the game. It might help to give you some more strategy within the game to add that. So if you punch the character and then it knocks them back and then you kick at the character, you'll be moving forward to add that, almost like initiating a combo within the game. If you're punching stationary and it knocks the character back and then you do a kick and then you remain stationary, your kick's going to miss. So that might help to add some more strategy to the game. The kick counter operates in almost the same way, but in this particular case you can see H equals 0, which means you're facing the normal way in the beginning of the game. The left side character is facing to the right. Now we have variable 1 equals 0, okay, meaning you're not pushing to the left, but then to the left of that it says variable 0 is greater than 0. That means you are pushing to the right. So the first line of the left side kick counter, which is this code here, is saying if variable 19 equals 0, that means if you're not currently doing a fighting move, and M equals 4, you've pushed the button and held it long enough, H equals 0, you're facing from left to right, variable 0 is greater than 0, you're pressing to the right. Variable 1, 0, you're not pressing to the left. Variable 3 is 0, you're not squatting. 2 is 0, you're not pressing up. 12, you are not currently jumping. And then actually the jumping and stuff doesn't really cancel out the move, in effect. It just stops it from becoming a move sequence while you're up in the air. But if you press punch or kick and then press jump while it's initiated, your character will jump and still have a punch and kick motion going on. And I'll probably go ahead and leave that in just because it adds that much more functionality to the attack. And it's not bad. And your character will still flip. They'll still move the same way. So I guess in effect it adds a bit of a jump move, but then there'll also be a jump kick where your character jumps in the air, and then when you're in the air you press the attack button, then they do a jump kick. So even more moves. It doesn't hurt to have more moves. So then we've got variable 0 equals 0, meaning you are no longer initiating a right step movement. You're not just moving to the right. But variable 4 equals 4 plus 2, you are moving to the right 2 spaces. Now variable 19 equals 4. Variable 19 equals 4. 4 is kick. So for every character, 4 is kick. So up at the top for the punch, variable 19 is 1, that's the punch. Variable 19 equals 4, that's the kick. I separated them because 2 and 3 might be used for knockback or for falling down. But then all of the other variables have placeholders, and then variables beyond the highest number used for move placeholders can be used to sequence out moves. And so when I add fireballs, charge attacks, and things like that, variable 19 will have a stepping pattern. So to press left and hold it to charge up an attack, variable 19 might say, okay, you've held left this long, now variable 19 is 11. Oh, you've held left a little longer, now variable 19 is 12. Now you've pressed forward while variable 19 is 12 and pressed attack, you're throwing a projectile attack, like with Guile. With a fireball, it will be you've pressed down, now variable 19 equals 15. Now, while variable 19 equals 15, you've pressed to the right, now variable 19 equals 16, and if variable 19 equals 16 and you've pressed the fire button, now you're throwing a fireball. Okay, so the timing is being controlled by each of the placeholders within the attack variables. The right side punch counter that you can see beginning down here for the right side player says essentially the same stuff, only backwards because the character's on the right side of the screen. But then variable 20 is the placeholder. We have variable 20 equals 1. That's what's allowing punching and kicking. So now down at the bottom, I've moved all of the sprites into their labels. So the labels for each character now have no hanging labels that need to be go-to'd or go-subbed or brought in. Now they're all under the same label, but they're being controlled, inputted, or ignored by the variables. And I'll show that. So here we have, if variable 19 equals 10, that's probably getting blurry because my camera doesn't like very little code going on here. You can see variable 19 equals 10, variable 19 equals 9, and then the placeholders for missile sprites, so they can come in there. 5, 4, this is the kick for Guile, for Soldier, I should call him. This is him falling down. Here we have the punch move for Guile. The squatting move, or no, this is the flipping move, the squatting move, the stepping and standing. And as I run up through this, each one of them has a variable that is ready to activate that sprite. So each of them is ready to activate their sprites. And so that's how I'm putting the animation in there for each of the characters. Guile has been moved to bank 7 along with the S and K characters because bank 6 was running out of space. And so, you know, I'm reaching that point where everything's coming together, and it's getting to where if I start to finish the game, everything's in the place where it needs to be. There probably won't be any more drastic changes in the placement of code or anything like that, just more code added to the specific banks where they go. So if I look into my banks here, I have 455 bytes left in bank 1. That's space for music. I have 2,361 bytes left in bank 2. That is space for menu options, difficulty, things like that. 3 and 4 are going to be for, or 3, 4, and 5 are the patterns for gathering controller input data, and then 5 would be for placing the character and for collisions. 6 is where all of the most of the left side player sprite data, and then of course missile placement data and the loop data for the left side character. 7 is the place for the most, or for all of the right side player sprite data and the corresponding placement, missile placement data for those characters, and then Guile. Guile, the soldier character, is also jammed in there. And as you can see, because I did that, there's a pretty close amount. There's 601 bytes left in 6, 706 bytes left in 7. That's going to be used up pretty fast though. As I plug in the spots for missile placement, then those are going to be used up. The two that are going to be the most important that I don't want to stress out are going to be 3 and 4. There's a lot of room in those, but that's where AI is going to be programmed. So a lot of, if this random number and character location variables, then there's a high chance or low chance of this or that move happening for the opponent character. So a lot's happened. The game is nearly finished now. Just putting in variables for all of the different moves, and there's this is an Atari game, so there's not going to be 112 different moves for each character. Now there are some little freebies like the ability to punch, and then in the middle of punching, jumping, so you have a jump punch, kick, and in the middle of kicking, jump, have a jump kick, a normal jump kick motion. That's all free. That's great. I could actually cancel out those little additional things, but why would I want to? Because it just adds more possibilities to the game. Now at the top you can see that I've added a huge amount of code that are all remarks. They're not part of the actual game, but they list what every variable does in the entire game in order. So, and I would recommend, if you're not going to keep a journal or something, or I guess even in my case I actually am keeping a journal also, then doing this might help. Especially if you're making a game that's as complex as this one. This is an extremely complicated Atari game. This isn't Donkey Kong. You're not running and jumping and that's it. You're not, this is so many timers and variables going on it's really stressing out the system. And it is ultimately, it's an exercise in futility, because you're going to run into that wall of cycle counts, and you're going to have little hang-ups and timing glitches that make the system want to hiccup and jump and shimmy and flicker and do all kinds of stuff. So figuring all that out is, that's the final part. I won't call it, debugging, because this is the whole process is, I don't know, too simple. It's too simple. It's like you're starting and you're creating a loop, and within that loop you're just reaching out and checking all of these little counting variables that are either increasing or being stationary or decreasing within a continuous loop. And you only have so much time that loop can actually constantly update things before it says, okay, I've run out of time, I can't put your screen up. And when it does that, you get a jitter or a shimmy or a shake or a flicker or something like that. And so now on emulators and on modern televisions in certain conditions, you can really stress and push what would be the Atari far beyond what its boundaries are. So this is, why you definitely don't want to program a video game entirely in emulation and then without thoroughly and completely testing it on as many different real world situations as possible. You don't want to just send a game out there straight out of code in emulation, because emulation can do way more and can hide and mask more problems than what real hardware can do. So you could program a game and then never test it on hardware, and then go, okay, I'm done with my game, finally it's finished, it's perfect. And then maybe you don't have an Atari, and then your friend says, oh, let's test it on my Atari, I have an Uno card, or I have a Harmony card. Then you start to play it and immediately it's jumping and shaking and you can't focus on the screen and nothing is working. Well, that's what happens if you're not constantly checking and testing the game on real hardware in real world playing scenarios. So, I mean, I guess you could say, hey, I made this game for the Atari, but you have to play it on Stella, or you have to play it on, whatever, Z26, or whatever emulator is playing an Atari game. But that's not, open to the world of, nostalgia driven or collectors or people who just really like those types of games. See, that's the thing is, when the guy said, oh, if you're, under the age of 40, you're not going to want the 2600 plus. That goes back quite a few episodes of my little adventure here. Well, my son, who just turned 9, plays and likes the Atari. I gave him an Atari Junior for his 9th birthday. So he plays it and likes it. He likes combat. He likes the games on it. He enjoys them. So to think that a kid, because they have Fortnite and Minecraft and stuff, would also not be interested in Atari, that's really not entirely true. It really depends on the personality and what that person likes. So, of course, if you're raised with people who only have a smartphone and only have the latest, game systems sold by Microsoft, Sony, or Nintendo or whatever. And so that means that for the upbringing of that child, you've gotten rid of old systems and constantly updated your phone. If you're one of these, keeping up with the Joneses kind of people where everything is constantly updated, and then along with that, you form that narrative of all old tech sucks and that why would you want to do that, then that kid's probably going to be trained and, programmed, so to speak, to reject all technology that's 6 months old, considered obsolete. But I'm the opposite of that. I actually, raised my kids in an arcade that's in our living room with arcade cabinets that we built, with real arcade cabinets with like multi-carts that can take tokens, seeing the evolution of games from their beginnings up until now. So they've had enough exposure to all types of games and the whole spectrum of games for them to form their own opinions. And so I might have a kid that only likes the newest game, like my oldest son, who likes Resident Evil 4 Remake and has beaten it many times, and he plays online games and he likes the newest stuff, and he doesn't usually play Atari or Sega or Super Nintendo or anything like that. He might, but it's not a common thing. Then my youngest son, he'll play Atari. He likes Atari. He'll play Atari. He'll play Sega Genesis. He'll play a Nintendo game, and he'll play Fortnite or Minecraft. Something like that. So yes, this does apply to all age groups. I don't believe that the 2600 plus is only for people who are 40 years or older, or that it wouldn't appeal to anyone younger, and that I think you're doing your kids a disservice to treat them like they have to stay in this constantly updating and constantly obsolete world of emerging and manufactured and trafficked technologies. If you keep them locked in that, then you're doing them a disservice. They need to know where it came from, what the beginnings of it were, what the original things were like. And the Atari's a great place for that. And one of the longest running game systems of all time. It ran from the late 70s into the 90s, and people were still buying games for it. It survived what later was coined the video game crash of like 82 and 83 when Nintendo walked into the CES and saw Coleco's version of Donkey Kong and the whole world just crashed. And that, coupled with people hating on E.T. and Pac-Man and stuff, made garbage out of Atari games, and they were bargain binning Atari games and just giving them away and stuff. When I think of the past, I think of programmers that were trying to be rock stars. I think of Activision, putting the names of programmers on cartridges. I think of games that didn't look as good as arcade games but were better. You know, like I could just name, I could spend a couple of hours just naming games that I believe are better on consoles than they were in the arcade. Pac-Man and Donkey Kong are those, but also Golden Axe, Altered Beast. So many different games for so many different reasons. And so I have a particular opinion about it, and some people, I'm not nostalgia driven. I enjoy the games today. I don't play them to get a feeling of nostalgia, because I remember when I was a kid, I was riding bikes and climbing trees and worshiping, you know, fictional ninja and stuff. I wasn't, Atari was something we did when it was storming and we were visiting relatives or something and we couldn't. And then when the Nintendo came out and we had a pro wrestling game, we were blistering our thumbs playing pro wrestling for hours on end and stuff. It was attached to things that we liked that weren't video games, and so video games weren't the thing, for at least for me. Now that I'm older and slower and deeper, I will play video games because I enjoy them. And so I enjoy Atari games. I enjoy playing Atari. I didn't have an Atari 8-bit computer when I was young. I have one now because I enjoy it. You know, back then I traded a Game Boy to someone for a Commodore 64. And I loved the Commodore 64, but I didn't have endless games for it, and it was still kind of a clunky, difficult machine for me to try to deal with. I had a friend who I traded something to for a Sega Master System, and I totally loved that, and I played the crap out of it, and I got a bunch of games for it. And so, you know, it was an adventure for me, but it wasn't the main adventure, and it didn't like cover all the bases, and it wasn't the be-all end-all, you know. So kids do like this kind of stuff, and I'm hoping kids will like my game and possibly, you know, buy it, or if it gets to go out for sale. My purpose, and I've said this before, is to have this game on a cartridge and somehow get it out there for sale. If I have to, you know, put it all together myself with, you know, reprint cartridges and labels that I make and sell 5 and 10 at a time on eBay, that's one thing. But if I can get somebody like Atari or whoever out there to produce this game and make it into cartridges, maybe with a box and a manual and stuff, whatever, either way, that's what I want from this, is for a person to see it online, click a button and buy it, and then be playing it on a system or on a 2600 plus or on a, you know, whatever, play it. What I don't want is for this to just be a free widespread ROM with nothing but, you know, spread out everywhere, and it's in everybody's emulator with all their other ROMs, and I don't get anything for it. And you know, that's part of what the danger of these ROM uploading style, like Retron, Retron 77 or the 2600 plus, that's the danger of those systems, is that they don't actually read directly off the cartridge. They're actually uploading the ROM onto the system, and through whatever means, firmware or hacking or whatever, someone can get in there and just scrape off whatever they've uploaded onto the system, and then they're stealing your game. And I hope that doesn't happen, you know. So, but anyway, the game is getting somewhere. We're really very, very close to finishing this game. Let's see if I can't get a good picture of this up here. You can see camera is a little wiggly. I bumped into it this morning getting my coffee. Love the propeller. So yeah, I'm gonna play this here real quick. Yeah, we have hit bars and a timer now. And the game's going to be done very, very soon. Thanks to everybody who's watching. You know, if you want to help me out with this, like and subscribe, comment. I got a new subscriber. Very creative name. I want this to be the name of my game, what's on the title screen. But there is a little bit of a kind of a comedic presence of the name already that I've kind of looked up and realized. Hopefully I won't run into any bumps with trying to do that, but I'm trying to make it stick, so hopefully that's what happens. And thanks to everybody who's watching.